All right, welcome back to My Mom's Basement, ladies and gentlemen. It is Robbie Fox and CLEM, and we are now joined by the legendary John Oates. Daryl Hall and John Oates are finishing up their most recent tour with 2 dates in Nevada on the 20th and the 22nd, and then John's off to Germany for some solo shows. And you've also got a single out this month, the end of this month, correct? October 28th?
Man, you got all the info. You got all the info.
Oh, cool. I did the homework, yeah. How are you, John?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
We're doing really well. Well, I'm doing better than my co-host Clem, to be honest with you. I'll let Clem tell you why.
Yeah, John, let me tell you a little story. This has been a little bit of serendipity. I don't, is serendipity always good or can it be bad? I feel like serendipity is a good thing, but I feel like this has been so so John, I had tickets to your show in Connecticut on Sunday. I bought them about 6 months ago. My wife and I were going to go. We had some friends. We were all really excited. We got a suite. We're going to have a good old time, see Hall and Oates and just jam it out. Kids are all staying home with babysitters. And I also have a Mets podcast here at Barstool. And we said, well, as long as the Mets don't blow their lead in first place and then play in the wild card round, I should be good. I don't know how much of a baseball fan you are. Right. But they blew the lead, and I, instead of listening to you and your partner's beautiful melodic voices, I don't know if melodic's a word, I was in a stream watching the Mets slowly squeak away their 101-win season next to a madman who was screaming the entire time. So I had like your voices, people heard in Connecticut, those beautiful angelic voices. I had the voice of basically the baseball devil in my ear the entire time, screaming as the Mets lost their season. And it was just serendipity in a bad way. But I was recording my Mets podcast and Robbie said, hey, we're going to do this at 12 today. And I said, I feel like I have to be in the same room as you, even if it's digital. There's something in the world here. I don't know what's going on. So I'm here now and I'm just honored to be in your presence. I love your music. I love your stuff. And if I couldn't see you in person, seeing you through a Zoom screen is the next best thing. So thank you so much for joining us here in the basement.
Of course, my pleasure. But I guess, hey, everyone's got their priorities, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. It was a work thing, to be fair. And you know, if you don't,
hey, you don't have to apologize. No apologies necessary.
I had to ask, you a baseball fan at all? I know you were born in New York. I hear a lot from Philly. Are you a Phillies guy? Is there any
I'm not, no, to be honest with you, of all the sports, baseball's probably the least of my favorites. I just, it's a little too zen for me. It's a little too slow. I'm more into the action sports, but I know people are going to hate me now. They're going to say, what do you mean action sports? No, you know what? I'll tell you what happened. My dad was a really good baseball player. Right after World War II, he was in a kind of a semi-pro league in New York City, kind of a sandlot kind of thing. And then when we moved to Pennsylvania, he played in like some really, I wouldn't, obviously not, not pro, but really good, like college players and stuff like that. And then he became a baseball coach. And I played Little League. Interestingly enough, I was left-handed, but the only glove I had was a right-handed glove. So I had to use a right-handed glove, even though I was left-handed. So, I think you can see where this story's going. And then I remember I was up to bat one time and the kid threw a pitch and I just froze and it hit me right in the eye. I saw it coming. It was like a 3D movie. It just went pop and I was like down on the ground and they took me to the hospital. Luckily, there was no serious damage. Thank God the kid was, 8 or something. But that was the last time I played baseball. So as you can see, that's probably what happened. Severe psychic baseball damage.
That is the origin story of a rock star, though. Glove in the hand he should be throwing with and a ball in the eye. And next thing you know, you're selling out arenas and people love you all across the world for your music. So God, if you had the glove on the right hand, who knows what you could have been? Hey,
listen, I went out for football too in 10th grade and I got tired of being run over by these giant guys. But I still like to watch football. So I don't know what that means, but we'll just leave it at that.
Now, I read that you were the co-captain of your high school wrestling team. Is that true?
Yes, I was a wrestler. I wrestled from junior high right through high school and actually had an offer to go to college on a wrestling scholarship, but turned it down because it was a state school in upstate Nowheresville, Pennsylvania, and I wanted to be in the city, so I elected to go to Temple. And I actually wrestled on the freshman team at Temple, did one match at Franklin and Marshall and won it, and then I quit. Because I didn't want to lose weight anymore and I was just more interested in playing in a band.
That's very fair. Yeah,
Undefeated.
Yeah,
gotta go out on top.
How did you balance life as like a wrestler? Because I know I cover like martial arts for Barstool stuff. I know wrestling is like, all in you have to be basically to be good at it. If you're the co-captain, how do you balance that and music? Because you were doing music in high school, right? You recorded your first single straight out of high school.
Oh yeah. I was doing, I've actually never had a job in my life other than music. Closest thing I've had to a job, I guess, would be teaching guitar lessons. But no, I started playing in a band in 7th grade and went straight through high school. Yeah, no, I just love wrestling. And our school, I went to school in a place called North Penn High School in Pennsylvania, a very famous Pennsylvania wrestling school. And if you know anything about wrestling, Pennsylvania is a hotbed of wrestling.
Big time.
And we had a lot of state champions and things like that. So you had a great coach and all that. And to this day, North Penn is a very well-known wrestling school. So yeah, no, it was a good thing to do. I like individual sports where you can't blame your teammates for losing. It's kind of how I think about it. I don't know why. But anyway, yeah.
Now, I know you and Daryl Hall famously met at a battle of the bands when like gunfire erupted and you ran into the same elevator. It's a great story in the history of rock and roll music and the history of music or whatever. Was this like one of the scarier moments of your life when gunfire erupts, or is that like, no, that's what happens when you go to a battle of bands in Philly in '67?
Okay, well, not to correct you, but to be totally accurate, it wasn't a battle of the bands. What had happened was Daryl had a group called the Temp Tones. I had a group called the Masters. We both had singles out on being played on Philadelphia's R&B radio stations. And we were invited by the disc jockeys who were playing our singles to come to this record hop, which was like that's what teenage dances were called in those days. And it was in a really bad neighborhood in Philadelphia. And we were back in the backstage area waiting to go on. And what we were going to do individually with our respective groups was lip sync our singles. And, and then a gang fight broke out. So you're half right, half wrong. A gang fight did break out, and we went down the service elevator onto the street. And as we were going down, literally crammed into this little elevator, we were like, "Hey man, I like your record. Yeah, cool, great to meet you." And we were both going to Temple University at the time in Philly. And then we started seeing each other around the campus. And eventually, his group needed a guitar player. My group broke up. I joined his group as a guitar player. That group broke up, and he and I kind of gravitated toward each other.
That's crazy. That's what I get for reading Wikipedia. They said battle of the bands. We're gonna have to go in and correct that.
Close enough.
Battle with the bands. Like the two gangs were like, listen, we're gonna go to where those bands are. We're gonna start shooting each other there, and that's right. That's how they.
We're gonna battle in front of the bands. Yes.
So are you like terrified, or it sounds like you were just making conversation in the elevator, like, this is a normal Friday night?
It all happened. Listen, I mean, we were living in Philadelphia during a time in the late '60s. It was a pretty violent time. There was a lot of racial unrest, a lot of gang fights and things like that. So no, it actually wasn't very surprising, because I knew going to that, because where the venue was, it was called the Adelphi Ballroom in West Philadelphia. I knew it was in a pretty dangerous neighborhood. So no, it actually wasn't that surprising. But it was like, hey, let's get out of here. We it's time to leave. We don't have to hang around here anymore.
Yeah, no, I could imagine that. One of my favorite quotes of yours is a simple one. You said, if you didn't live through the 70s and 80s, if you weren't a rock star during that time, there's just no way you can comprehend what it was like. And I believe that. Obviously, I did not live through that time, but who are the guys that you respect for living the life on and off the stage, where you look back at the 70s and 80s and you go, wow, they truly were rock stars?
Wow, there's so many. I mean, I think of people like Robert Plant, who, obviously the prototypical like rock lead singer, right? If you had to invent one, he lived through the Led Zeppelin experience and went on to have a great solo career. He kind of became an Americana legend. He's doing amazing roots music, and I have a lot of respect for him. And then I look at people like Jagger and Richards. I mean, and the Stones. I mean, look at those guys. I mean, say what you will about them, but they're still out there playing, and people still love them, and they have a legacy of music that is just unbelievable. And as much as Keith has abused himself over the years, a guy can still play and he can still stand on stage. Mick is the exact opposite. The guy runs like 5 miles a day and does aerobics before the show. I mean, he's like skinny as a whippet and super, super healthy. So I don't know, you know, listen, if you can survive in the entertainment business, especially in rock and roll, and survive with your body and mind intact, and that's a win.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, could you imagine if I would have told you like 50 years ago, you would still be on tour with Daryl Hall?
You know, I think of that a lot, to be honest with you. And I play a lot of solo shows, and there's songs from the Abandoned Luncheonette album, which, by the way, in 2023 will have its 50th anniversary. I say on stage sometimes, I said, if anyone would have ever told me when I, you know, wrote this song back in you know, well, it was actually written in late 72, right before Christmas, but you know, whatever. If anyone would ever told me that I'd be on stage playing a song that's 50 years old, I would have never been able to believe it. And then I think about it, you know, I think about what it was like when I was a kid, you know, when I was like you know, like 18 or 20 even. And I think, wow, 50 years before that, it was freaking 1912. So I'm like going, wow, you know, I'm like thinking, so, and I think of kids today, think of this early 70s, the way I would have thought of the 1920s, you know, so it's crazy. I mean, it's really crazy. The fact that those songs have endured is just, it's a miracle and a blessing, and, you know, something you just can't, you can't be, I'm extremely, you know, respectful and, you know, proud of that.
John, as someone who just turned 40, and I'm starting to have the same thing, 15 years ago was forever 1996 in my mind. And 1996 is very far from 15 years ago. However, I was listening to some Hall & Oates last night. I was kind of having a little pity party for myself because the Mets weren't playing. I said, let me just hear all the songs I missed. And my wife's like, oh, this was the Onk. They led off with Maneater. This was the Onk. Or he's telling me all the different spots. And my daughter comes in, who is going to be 8 years old. And she's like, I know this song. I know this song. She knows every single one of the songs we were listening to. And it's just, like you said, it's incredible. 50 years, you know, ago, these songs were coming out, and our kids know them, and she knows them from, you know, some of them were on the bus, but some of them are in movies, which has to be great. Every time you guys are, you make my dreams come true. That is always the wedding singer for me when they're trying on the dresses and stuff like that.
Or 500 Days of Summer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or Step Brothers too, right? I think Step Brothers when they become best friends.
That song is the gift that keeps giving. That's crazy.
It really is amazing. I'd love to ask you about Live Aid. Obviously, a lot of people my age, when they think of Live Aid, they think of Freddie Mercury leading that Wembley crowd, right? But also, there was a bigger crowd over in Philadelphia for Live Aid. You guys were one of the headliners on that insane bill.
Yes.
What do you remember about that night? I assume it was just a crazy, crazy logistical festival from the standpoint of how many bands were actually on the gig.
Well, luckily I didn't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah.
But you know, you're right. I mean, it was, you know, okay, so you have to put it in the context of the times. We were at the top of the pop charts and top of the pop world at the time. And it was Philadelphia, our hometown. So it only seemed logical that we would be, you know, if the headliner, if not one of the headliners. So as it turned out, Mick Jagger had a solo album out at the time, and he didn't have a band, and he actually asked us and our band to back him up. So Mick came and we rehearsed with him in New York City, and he didn't say anything about the fact that Tina Turner was going to come on stage, and he also didn't say anything about the fact that he was going to rip her skirt off either, which was kind of cool and interesting. And we brought out Eddie Kendrick and David Ruffin, the former lead singers of the Temptations, who we had just finished a show at the Apollo Theater in New York with. So the whole thing was this kind of review almost. You know, Daryl and I played our set. We brought out Eddie and David. We played some classic Temptations, and then Mick came out and did his Mick thing, and then he brought Tina Turner out, which was kind of a surprise to everyone. And they went through this whole routine that they did. So yeah, we headlined that night, and it was, as far as I recall, and I'm, you know, I'm not sure I'm 100% right, but I believe to that date, it was the biggest music event that had ever been staged anywhere in the world. And it also was simulcast around the world, which was also a totally new thing.
Yeah, I think I saw there were like 78,000 in Wembley and then something like 89,000 in Philadelphia.
Yeah, we were at JFK, I think that was what the stadium was called back then.
Crazy. Do you have a favorite show that you ever played?
A lot. You know, I think it's always like the first timers, you know, first time you play in London, first time you play Madison Square Garden, first time you play in Japan or something like that, you know, at the Budokan. But I'll tell you, one of my favorite shows was the Apollo Theater show that we did with Eddie Kendrick and David Ruffin, the one that I was talking about earlier. That show was amazing because when Daryl and I first met, one of the first things we did was go to the Apollo Theater and see the original Temptations. And Daryl was friends with the guys in the Temptations. And we hung around backstage and everything. So then we went back, of course, years and years later, headlining the Apollo, bringing back Eddie and David, and we did a review of the great Temptation classics. And it was kind of like tripping because back in the 60s, there I was sitting in the audience watching the Temptations. Now I'm on stage with two of the guys doing the same songs. It was really almost psychedelic and a musically psychedelic moment.
I'm so happy you didn't say the show that I missed. Like, oh, this show, you guys won't believe it, but this show in Connecticut.
Wait a minute. I want to go back to the show you missed. Hold on a second. I just realized after you told me this whole story about the Mets, what you forgot to mention was the fact that your wife went to the show anyway without your ass.
Yep.
So okay. So all right. You didn't say that part.
She was dolled up and looking great. My guy I do another podcast was with. He's like, I got a picture. She goes, oh, look at Clem's wife. She looks great. And he's like, usually she's used to being the after picture. She was ravishing. She was out there with all her friends. And I had to stay at home. And I woke up with the kids the next morning. I was supposed to be staying at the hotel without the kids. They were here with their grandparents. So I took an L on every single front. But based on the videos I got, you guys put on quite a show.
It was a good night. It was a good night. Yeah.
How have your inspirations musically changed over the years? Like, I assume you don't have the exact same guitar inspirations as you had when you first started playing. So how has that evolved for you as a player?
As a player?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as a guitar player, I've even from the time I was a little kid, I started playing guitar at 6 years old. So I've been playing a long time. So I always joke I should be a lot better by now. But I never had to. No one ever had to tell me to practice. I sit here. I got an arm's length away. There's a guitar. So it's always around. I play all the time. And going to Nashville when I relocated, my family relocated in Nashville and started going there in the late '90s, early 2000s. The bar was set so high musically with the players in Nashville that I had been coasting for a number of years, just playing kind of the same songs over and over again, not really being too challenged in that regard. And I realized I had to do some woodshedding. I had to kick butt and get back to practicing. So I became a much better guitar player by living in Nashville over these past 15 years.
Is there an album that you put out with Hall that you feel is your best from a purely musician standpoint?
Yeah, probably Abandoned Luncheonette, I would say, because it was just a completely organic recording. It was, we were in New York City. We were under the watchful eye of the great Arif Mardin, who was one of the world's greatest producers. And he surrounded us with the greatest musicians in New York at the time, people like Bernard Purdy and Gordon Edwards and, just these amazing studio musicians. And so, and one thing that I learned very early on is that when you surround yourself with greatness, it elevates your game. It brings out the best in you, and you're able to do things that perhaps you couldn't do before because there's this kind of sonic support system that kind of carries you along. So I learned a lot in that experience, and that record was made in the most natural ways possible. The drum kit, bass, keyboard, a couple keyboards, and that, acoustic piano, electric piano, some amplifiers, electric guitar, acoustic guitar. That's it. And then, and that album was played organically and performed. Although I will say that a lot of our music was played that way, even up through the 80s. But we started adding more technology to it.
You didn't release a solo album until 2002, right? After spending 30 years at the top of the charts as like one of the most prolific singer-songwriters of pop and soul. Why is that? Did you ever have the urge to release something solo before then? Was it just a different time? Were you more focused on your collaboration?
Daryl had been releasing albums as early as the late 70s, solo albums. I had other things I wanted to do. I used my success to do other things. I drove race cars. I became a pilot. And then in the 90s, when Daryl and I took a hiatus, I wanted to have a family. I wanted to build a house, have a kid, do all the things that I couldn't do on the road. So really, I wasn't motivated to do more music. I was motivated to do less music. And it wasn't until the late 90s, early 2000s when I got the bug I realized I had a backlog of songs that were just sitting in the basement. And I wanted to get them out. And I did this album in 2002, which was really just kind of a collection of odd material that I pieced together, and then moved to Nashville, and then really got involved with a lot of great musicians and great people who urged me to continue. And then that's when I really started recording. So, now I have 6 solo albums and some live albums as well. Yeah, there's no end in sight for that.
Wow. Becoming a pilot and a race car driver, is one much harder than the other?
Well, as soon as I stopped driving race cars is when I became a pilot. I had to get my adrenaline junkie thing one way or the other. Well, it was just fun. It was just I'm kind of technical, and I've always loved driving. And what happened was, we were flying around in some private charter planes, and I would always sit on the jump seat next to the pilots and keep asking them questions. And then finally, one of the pilots got pissed off and just said, "Here," and handed me this book. He said, "Read this." He said, "If you want to learn how to fly, read this book and get back to me later." And so I did. It was one of those, kind of beginners flying manuals. And I did. I said, "Hey, man, I want to learn how to fly." And he ended up teaching me. Yeah, and I flew all around the country in my little private plane, and it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. I still love flying. I don't fly actively anymore, but I still love it. And every once in a while, if I get in and I can get behind the stick every once in a while, I'll fly a little bit.
That's amazing.
I feel like being a father is even harder. Please tell me it's harder, because I'm a father and I'm losing my mind here.
Being a father is definitely, well, you know what, whether it's harder or easier, it's the biggest challenge you'll ever have. And it's the most rewarding thing that you'll ever do. So, you know what I mean? It's worth it. It's worth it. Our son's 26 now. He's almost 27. So
awesome.
Do you have a song that you wish you wrote?
A lot of them. Any song that Joni Mitchell ever wrote, I wish I wrote. I wish I would have written some of the great Curtis Mayfield songs, like "I'm So Proud," "Keep on Pushing." And I wrote a song, my most recent song is called "Pushing the Rock Uphill." It's a little nod to Curtis Mayfield, who's one of my big heroes. Hey, I wish I would have wrote "Johnny Be Good." I wish I would have wrote "Deep River Blues" by Doc Watson. So on and so forth.
And then this is a debate we were having around the office, not really a debate, more of a discussion we were having around the office the other day. And I'd love to get your answer. We were saying, what albums or what songs remind you of fall? The weather's getting a little colder, at least on the East Coast. And we were saying, what's like a fall album to you?
A fall album. Wow. Geez, I don't know.
I think like Rubber Soul, like that reminds me of fall. I don't know why. It might be the Norwegian Wood, something like that. But yeah.
All right. Well, maybe it's I don't know, but I can tell you. What about the singles? What about the Halloween singles? "Dinner with Drac."
Yeah, those work.
Monster Mash and "Flying Purple People Eater." How about that?
That works. Tell you what, I wish I wrote Monster Mash. You got to be making bank off the royalties on that. Yeah.
Too, yes.
Oh, Ghostbusters! You hear the legendary song about how Ghostbusters
that's
is
right.
written, right? Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Who are you gonna call? Yeah. All right, and then this is a question I ask every musician who comes on my show. I'm a big Oasis fan, and Noel Gallagher once said that he summed up everything he's ever wanted to say in his career with 3 songs: "Rock and Roll Star," "Live Forever," and "Cigarettes and Alcohol." If you had to sum up everything you've wanted to say in your career with 3 songs, which 3 would you select?
"She's Gone," "Man-Eater," and this new song that I just wrote, "Pushing a Rock."
I love it. I can't wait to hear the new song.
Yeah, October 28th. Stand by.
All right. Well, everyone look out for it. Of course, if you're in Germany, you'll be able to see some solo shows coming up as well, right? So if there's any listeners from Germany for this,
I'm playing an acoustic set with an amazing guitar player, a very good friend of mine named Guthrie Trapp from Nashville. He and I do an acoustic show together, and we are the special guest for Beth Hart. And Beth is fantastic. She's one of my favorite artists, and she's very, very popular in Germany. So Guthrie and I decided if we want to get in front of a great musical audience in Germany, we just go out over there with her and kind of ride on her coattails. So it's going to be an interesting. I haven't played acoustically solo in Germany ever in my life. So I always like doing things for the first time.
Yeah, you said that your favorite shows are your first. Maybe you'll have one of your new favorite shows on this tour.
Possibly.
I
Let's
guess I'm
hope
going to
so.
fly to Germany to see you. I missed you once. I'm not missing again. I'm going to Germany right now. I'm telling the wife she has the kids for the next week.
Start reading up on German, Clem.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
That was a good interview, man. I appreciate it. All
Thank
right.
you.